So the MCU is the biggest film franchise ever, compiling almost 40 projects and a significant amount of terrible comedy.
What the hell is even that?
Overall, there's a lot to like about the MCU, but there's also a lot that I completely despise, stuff that makes me start sounding like Martin Scorsese. Overall, this is a franchise that I've invested a lot of my time on, so I'm here to give you my rankings of every single MCU project. There are literally 39 of these, so I'm going to go through most of them fast, so this video isn't going to be 30 minutes long. I'll break down the top 15 in more depth. I've reviewed all of these projects on my TikTok already, so make sure to follow me there, and also to make sure to like this video and subscribe for more videos like this. Leave your rankings below, and also spoiler warning is in effect for all of these. In last place is Miss Marvel, which has a strong first episode, but the following 5 episodes are just a chore to get through. It's really just not for me, and this is the MCU project that I would least want to rewatch. Number 38 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, by far the worst film. Completely disjointed and lacking any humanity. The film insults your intelligence with its comedy, but Jonathan Majors is great. At number 37 is Eternals, just so boring and forgettable. I love Chloe Zhao and respect her, and I really love the ambition of this project, but it just does not work at all. Number 36 is Black Widow, just pointless and lacks any real stakes. The CGI is a mess and the characters are cheesy. This came out about 5 years too late. At number 35 is Thor: Love and Thunder. I love you, Taika, but this film was just not it. Way too goofy, terrible CGI, and easily Chris Hemsworth's worst performance as the character. But Christian Bale was great. Number 34 is She-Hulk. Fantastic finale, like really, really good. Everything else is borderline unwatchable. And number 33 is Captain Marvel. Certainly not the worst thing in the world, but a lifeless performance from Brie Larson and a mostly forgettable plot. Number 32 is The Incredible Hulk. Speaking of forgettable, this might be the most forgettable movie ever. After a rewatch, it's certainly not the worst movie of all time, but definitely not one I'm going to be going back to. At 31 is Thor 1. A decent introduction to a great character, but just sort of kind of weightless and forgettable. At number 30 is Iron Man 2, a mediocre sequel to a great movie. Very weak villain and just a big disappointment. At number 29 is Iron Man 3, which is slightly better than number 2, but also suffering from the same exact problems. The Mandarin twist was absolutely terrible, but Robert Downey Jr. is just slightly better in this movie. At 28 is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So disappointing, but still entertaining to a certain extent. It just needed a better marketing campaign to temper expectations and a slightly better pace. Number 27 is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. A big step down from Guardians 1, but still a fun adventure with a satisfying ending, but a really weak villain. And number 26 is Moon Knight. Amazing performance from Oscar Isaac, but mostly everything else was undercooked and hard to remember. The final fight was kind of really disappointing, and it could have just been so much better. Number 25 is Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a good origin story for the new Captain America. I really like this one, but at times it is incredibly slow. They probably could have pulled this story off in a 1-hour runtime. And number 24 is Thor: The Dark World. It's definitely a little bit overhated. This one is slightly less boring than the first one, and I don't think the Dark Elves are that terrible. The final fight is fine, and overall I think this movie's okay. At number 23, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Ultron was just super underutilized and could have been done so much better. The film is just average, it's just good, but what's disappointing is that it could have been a top 5 movie in the MCU. Number 22 is What If. Some episodes are amazing, some are trash. It's definitely a mixed bag, but there is definitely some fun to be had in this one. Number 21 is Spider-Man: Homecoming, a good first outing for Spider-Man in the MCU, but one that felt a little bit cheaper than any other Spider-Man film to this point. Michael Keaton was a great villain though. At number 20 is Captain America: The First Avenger, a pretty unique film in this franchise. The World War II setting is great, but the film is definitely really slow at times. Number 19 is Hawkeye, easily the best MCU Christmas project. This thing is tons of fun and Haley Steinfeld is great. I just really don't like how they handle the character of Kingpin. At number 18 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I really don't hate this one. It's tons of fun and actually hilarious at times. And it keeps things simple. It just doesn't try to do anything more than it needed to. I definitely think it's a solid movie. At number 17 is Loki. A little overrated, but it definitely has some really great moments and a great performance from Tom Hiddleston. It's just that the relationship between Loki and Sylvie though is just a little bit too forced for me. And number 16 is Spider-Man: Far From Home. I'm a big fan of this one. I think it's one of the best Spider-Man stories done on the big screen and has one of the best MCU villains. Okay, on to the top 15. Ant-Man is a great film. It's the first heist superhero movie that I've ever seen, and the two genres match up really well. Paul Rudd was a perfect casting as Scott Lang, and his chemistry with Michael Douglas as Hank Pym is what truly makes this film so engaging from the start. I think this is Evangeline Lilly's best performance as Hope, with her character having so much more depth in this film than any other appearance that she's made. I actually like Darren Cross as the villain in this film, not like the other garbage movie that he's in, because I understand his motivations and why his character would take the turn that he did. This is the only film that truly takes advantage of the ridiculousness of Ant-Man's powers, having one of the most fun final fights that takes place in a kid's playset. It's so great, and overall I really like this film. I just think it's a little goofy at times, and I think a lot of what happens in the future films kind of soured my taste on this one. Hot take, but I think Endgame has to fall this low. My reasoning might surprise you, but it is all because of the time travel. Infinity War had one of the best cliffhangers in film history, and I spent a better part of a year trying to visualize how the writers would build a story that on the ends of that. I feel like time travel is one of the laziest plot devices in the history of storytelling. Acting is a shitty way out of any corner that a writer could put themselves into. Time travel rarely works in films and never really makes sense, creating more questions than answers, and this film definitely suffers from that. You have to jump through so many hoops to accept the logic behind the time travel in this one. I just wish they had done something a little bit more unique. The Thanos from Infinity War is also thrown away way too quick, and instead our heroes face off against a much duller version of the Mad Titan. But I will say though, the final fight and the nostalgia are perfect. Iron Man's sacrifice and funeral and Cap's happy ending are absolutely great. There's just always going to be a part of me that felt like this film could have been so much more than it was. Our introduction to the world of Wakanda and the Black Panther, played amazingly by the late Chadwick Boseman. Black Panther is a fantastic film that has one of the best villains in the MCU with Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. It has by far my favorite score in the MCU, and a really great location that is so well developed and written. The film has great pacing, a fantastic plot that makes complete sense and holds so much subtextual value, and really high stakes. So why is it only 13? Well, the final fight just sucks. It just does, man. The CGI is the worst maybe in the entire MCU. The fight should have been hands-on, personal, practical. Instead, the entire thing was made on a computer, and it almost ruined the entire film for me. Still, this film is gorgeous. I love it. There's something to be said about the experience of watching WandaVision. This was the first MCU project in almost 2 years due to the pandemic, and it quickly created a mystery within its first 3 episodes, which were all filmed like sitcoms from the 50s and 60s. It built this incredible sense of intrigue over the plot of this show, and created a social media storm of theories and breakdowns that were so incredibly fun to be a part of. I have to admit, this is the only Marvel show that I remember myself being genuinely excited for every single week when it released, staying up till 3 a.m. to watch each episode as they came out. Although the finale sort of fell flat, and the answers to a lot of the theories were kind of disappointing, the ride and the mystery in those early episodes made it one of my favorite MCU experiences, and Elizabeth Olsen gives such an amazing performance to propel this to number 12. A fantastic Avengers-level movie, pitting our favorite heroes against each other while introducing Spider-Man, Black Panther, and including a fantastic villain in Baron Zemo. So why is this only 11? Well, for one, I just like the films ahead of it a little bit more. I am a big fan of the Civil War source material, and seeing the skies and scope the MCU is able of accomplishing today, I really wish that they had done Civil War on a bigger stage, maybe dedicating an entire saga to it. This film feels significantly smaller than the comic book, with the stakes being so much less important. The fights are great though, and the idea of the main villain just being this regular dude who was able to destroy the Avengers by simply scheming is so great. It's just a great movie. The first time Hollywood took a big swing in doing some massive superhero crossover. The experience of seeing all of these characters cross paths for the first time and team up was unlike anything I had ever experienced in the theater. An experience I hold so close to myself today. The characters have such a great and unique chemistry, and Tom Hiddleston's Loki is such a fantastic first villain. I don't have any complaints about this film, despite maybe Joss Whedon being a terrible human being, and the film is not aging as well as some of the other Marvel films, but it's still one of the most important and influential films in cinematic history. I originally had this film a lot lower because I actually have a lot of problems with it in retrospect, but once I sat down and thought about it, I realized that I cannot rank this any lower than this. No Way Home was one of the best movie theater experiences that I have ever had, and it's really not even close. The level of excitement I had entering this movie was unmatched by anything else on this list, and the nostalgia of seeing my favorite childhood characters unite on screen was an absolute dream come true. I walked out thinking this was the greatest thing ever put to screen. Over a year later, I can sit here and say the story is kind of dumb. Writing is mediocre. Peter Parker sort of undoes his character development from the previous film, and the whole film just kind of felt like an excuse to have this mega crossover. It didn't really feel as earned as it should have. But who cares about all that? The experience is what truly counts, and it was a perfect experience. The ending of this film was also extremely well performed and written, with a fantastic web-slinging sequence to close the picture. I am so excited for Spider-Man 4 though, although I'm hoping for a more down-the-earth character study type movie. This is one of the few MCU films that doesn't feel like it relies half its runtime on shitty comedy. Scott Derrickson is a great filmmaker, and he proves it here, introducing us to a Doctor Strange played perfectly by Benedict Cumberbatch, a character who is pretty silly in the comics, but in this film turns out to be one of the biggest badasses in the entire MCU. He's such a good character, sometimes seeming a little too like Tony Stark, but still being so easy to connect with. Tilda Swinton is also amazing as the Ancient One, although the film completely wastes Mads Mikkelsen. It relies a little bit too much on CGI. But the ending is great, and just honestly, he's my favorite character in the entire MCU, so I really love this movie. I absolutely adored this film when it came out. I actually thought it might be my number 1. But after the recency bias wore off, I do see some issues with this film that bump it down to 6. Overall, though, this is a kick-ass kung fu superhero movie that I didn't know I wanted, with Simu Liu being an absolute badass and the whole support cast being amazing. Tony Leung plays one of the best comic book villains ever, with Marvel completely redeeming their mistake in Iron Man 3. He has such a deep and emotional story about family and loss, and it's just so great. The ending is a little over-reliant on CGI, but man, this thing really kicks ass. The riskiest film that Marvel has ever made, taking characters that no one had ever heard of at the time and having James Gunn, a mostly unknown director at the time, famous for making Scooby-Doo, take the reins. I'm not sure that anybody would have expected this one to be one of the greatest comic book movies ever, but fuck yeah it is. The cast is amazing, so let's start with that. Chris Pratt is perfect in this role and in this world, and his chemistry with Zoe Saldana makes for one of the best relationships and romances in the MCU. Dave Bautista as Drax is so much fun, and Rocket and Groot are staples to the MCU. I think Ronan is a great villain, and personally, I think the dance battle to save the universe is a little bit goofy, but it actually works really well and it feels earned. The film expands the MCU into outer space, and at the time it was so cool to see these places in the larger universe. We also get to see Thanos in his full form for the first time. We get to see the Kree, the Nova Corps, and just so much more. This is a fantastic movie and such a good time. The original Iron Man movie, directed by Jon Favreau, was the first ever MCU movie and the one that essentially created the modern world of superheroes that we know today. Does the film completely age well? Not exactly, but it's still incredibly fun, introducing us to Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, one of the greatest characters to ever be written. He absolutely is incredible in this role, and it's the one that he's going to be remembered for. The villain kind of sucks and is completely forgettable, but overall this film is really great, and it's going to go down in history as one of the movies that changed the entire film industry. Taika Waititi is actually a great filmmaker, believe it or not. Ragnarok took a character who was mostly boring and one-dimensional in the MCU and made him one of the most hilarious and badass characters they had. This movie is so much fun, with the entire class clearly loving this material. This is my favorite Loki performance from Tom Hiddleston. Tessa Thompson is also great as Valkyrie. Jeff Goldblum is hilarious, and Cate Blanchett is way too good to be doing Marvel movies. She kicks ass in this thing. The CGI in this movie isn't horrendous, which is a big change for the MCU. The music is awesome, it expands the MCU, and oh yeah, Hulk versus Thor. Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo have so much natural chemistry, which is something that really makes this film amazing. I give this film a lot of credit for succeeding in a tremendous way when it had every chance in the world of being complete dog shit. The real-life passing of Chadwick Boseman made the making of this film almost impossible, and I was thinking all of last year that this film would likely end up being an insensitive mess, but I was completely wrong. Ryan Coogler crafted such an emotional epic that totally respects the passing of the real-life Black Panther, while still pushing the universe forward. Phase 4 had entirely been about grief and how we move forward, something that easily bled into this film, with Letitia Wright taking the reins as the lead and giving one of my favorite performances in the MCU. She's opposed by Namor, one of the best villains that Marvel has done to this point. Him and his people are legitimately terrifying, and the revenge plot for Shuri against Namor feels so personal, and it totally works. Angela Bassett gives an amazing performance, probably should have won the Oscar. She is just amazing in this as well. And overall, I just really love this movie. I got really emotional watching it, and I just think it's a really powerful film. The Winter Soldier is fantastic, taking the MCU down to a human level and telling an espionage flick that feels more like a James Bond movie than it does a superhero flick. Chris Evans gives the best performance as Cap in this film, and the chemistry between him and Scarlett Johansson is amazing. Sam Jackson is also a standout, and I also really appreciated all the villain characters in this movie. The film is also incredibly impactful for the entire MCU, with every movie after this being completely affected by this one, in a way that I'm not really sure any other film has been for this series. And overall, this film is just a massive accomplishment. I really have no complaints about it. It's just a really, really good comic book movie, probably a top 3 comic book film ever. So yeah, The Winter Soldier, number 2. To me, there's really no other film that could have taken this spot. It was the culmination of 10 years of slow building and teasing, finally bringing together all of the characters to face off against Thanos. The film is a heist-type movie with Thanos and the Avengers racing to collect the Infinity Stones, but essentially it's a non-stop battle from beginning to end. This film works on every single level and completely nailed the impossible task of living up to expectations set by the 10-year build-up. The ending is so dark and surprising, it perfectly leads into Endgame and builds so much hype for that movie. Overall, to me, there's really just no argument against Infinity War being number 1. It's by far the best MCU movie to me. It's the only one that really succeeded on those expectations and told a story that was worth its runtime. This to me is the gold standard going forward for the MCU, and hopefully they'll be able to match this with either Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars or whatever they're doing next. So that's it. That's the entire MCU, and there are, one too many projects. Seriously, Marvel, slow down. We do not need this many. But yeah, leave your rankings down below. Thank you for watching. Make sure to follow me on TikTok, and yeah, I'll see y'all later.